90 days ago, I started this podcast, and the goal for the first quarter was to break through to the top 25% of podcasts, period. And the reason I wanted to do that is because part of the whole reason of doing this is to build frameworks and workflows that I can pass along to you guys and say, hey, this is the journey I've taken. This is the journey I've helped other people take. And this is how you can sustainably podcast. And so we've gotten 90 days in, and I can report that the podcast has failed to reach that goal. And I don't know, I don't have those workflows. I don't have those strategies for you yet. So if you're new here, my name is Caleb. This is the podcaster's journey, where I'm just on a mission to document my journey for your benefit so that your podcasting journey can benefit from all the mistakes and all the mishaps that I have along the way. So without further ado, let's get into this episode where I'm going to share with you exactly what I tried for my strategy and marketing on social media and how you can do a better job with your social media in the future and don't do exactly what I just did. Let's talk about it. Okay, so for the last 90 days, I had a specific social media strategy that I was using and employing, and I thought was going to get me to where I needed to be with this podcast. And maybe you've tried that as well. You have a specific strategy that you're trying, or maybe you have no clue what to do on social media. That's totally fine. We're here to talk about that today. So what I did is akin to this story that I want to read to you from Daniel Priestley's book, Oversubscribed. I'm going to just kind of skim through it, but he outlines a scene from a busy and overcrowded market in Bali. And he was going from stall to stall, glancing at the products that were on display, and just kind of perusing where the merchants were thrusting their garments and their trinkets in front of his face all the time, and literally trying to grab his attention and force him into their shop and try to force him to buy something, force him to buy into something. And he goes on to talk about how after several days of this, he become pretty much immune to it and just kind of stone-faced and just kind of would peruse around and not pay any attention to the salespeople. Even if they were tugging on his shirt or grabbing at his hand, he just kept on moving. He'd kind of figured out how to tune it out mentally. But he talks about how as he was going through that and a few days in, he looked across the market and he saw a familiar face, an old friend that he'd done business with before. And so he made his way through the market and worked his way towards his friend. And as he got to his friend, he gently tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, so good to see you." And he watched as his friend turned with a very stoic face and just kind of, same way Daniel had been, kind of tuning everybody out. And he watches that changed in an instant to a friendly smile as his friend realized, hey, I know this person. This is somebody I actually want to talk to. And what I want to relay and what Daniel's trying to relay in his book is that the world has become a very noisy marketplace, especially the podcasting world. There's so many people out there trying to gather our attention. And unfortunately, my strategy for marketing on social media for this podcast has been akin to one of these street vendors, just kind of shoving the podcast in people's faces on social media and asking them to listen. Well, maybe not asking to listen, but just, sharing little clips over and over again without too much thought as to how they tell the overarching story of how it's going to help you reach more listeners with your podcast, how it's going to make your podcast more sustainable, how you can do this easier, better, put one of those words in there of what you're trying to achieve with your podcast. And so what I'm excited about today's episode for is that as I was looking through my outline and it was talking about how to use social media for your benefit with your podcast. And so I started writing that outline as if I was this expert in social media for podcasts. And I started to, it's like, you know what? I had a goal of what I wanted to do with social media and how that was going to be the tool to really drive my podcast forward towards this goal. Let's go check out what we did with that. And so I went and looked at my stats. I looked on Instagram. I looked on YouTube, and I looked at a Facebook group that I created. Those were kind of the main stats I pulled from. And what I found was kind of abysmal and really kind of humbling. And I was like, you know what? I don't think. And so as I was writing it from this perspective of being an expert in social media and reviewing all this data, I was like, I'm really not an expert. And this is really supposed to be a open journal and diary of my experience in podcasting so that you can learn from it. And I would be a real fraud if I tried to figure out how I could do this better and present it to you as factual information of how you should do it. And so this idea birthed that I was like, you know what? It's been about a quarter. And every 10 episodes, I do these episodes where I talk about the things I've learned in the last 10 episodes. So that's a cool little benchmark. But what if I do like every quarter, about every 17 or 18 episodes, I do an episode where I talk about this, the social media marketing and what I tried for the last quarter and what worked and what didn't work. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm just going to talk to you about what I did, my strategy for social media, and what I'm going to change and tweak for this next quarter. And if you're willing to, I'd invite you to adopt and steal or use these tactics for your own podcast. I don't have any data yet to tell you that this is going to be worth your time, other than to tell you that what I have tried and how I'm going to tweak it because I believe and why I believe that's going to help in the future. Okay. So let's talk about what I did over this past 90 days. Over this past 90 days, I focused primarily on repurposing the reels from this podcast into a short form. And I was really excited about it. The first, I don't know, month and a half, I really heavily leaned into that. And I would just grab, I don't know, like 10 clips out of an episode and just slop right into social media, into Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikToks, and they did okay. So for Instagram, I gathered 10.3 thousand, accounts organically reached through impressions. So not too bad as far as how many accounts were reached. And I did achieve around 45 new followers over the past 90 days on my Instagram account. But when I take up the amount of churn that I had, I lost about 26 followers in that amount of time. So a net of about 19 people. I have achieved a conversion rate of about 0.2%. And 1% is considered a good rate. So I am far beneath the rate of what should be good. I should be able to capture about 1% of that 10,000 accounts that we looked at earlier, which is going to be about 100 people. So I should, if I've done my social media correctly and I've talked to the right people and I've told my story well, I should be converting that about 10,000 impressions into 100 new followers over the course of that quarter. And I didn't. So this just tells me that the story isn't landing, that I need to think about how I'm telling the story. On YouTube, I had a similar account. I had about almost 34,000 impressions on YouTube, which is awesome. And the channel grew by 14 subs this past quarter, which is awesome as well. But the click-through rate is about 1.1%, and that needs to be anywhere from 2 to 10%. So we've got some room for growth there again. So again, I'm seeing like views are doing good, impressions are doing good, but when people view it, when people click through, they're not really converting to subscribers. They're not really converting to, followers that are actually going and listening to the podcast. So either A, I don't know my audience well enough, and I'm not speaking to them in a way that lands, and I'm not talking to their pain points, or B, I just haven't put out enough content to really know if I'm reaching the right people yet. I think with 90 days and a quarter, I think I should probably be starting to hit on the right target audience. I've had a specific individual in mind when I'm recording here on the podcast. And I think I've done a good job with that. I think I just need to let that trickle down into my short form content and how I'm telling the stories when I repurpose those short form reels. So that is what's happened and that was kind of the extent of my social media strategy. Unfortunately, it's really kind of sad, honestly, when I step back and I take in this little short excerpt from Daniel Priestley's book and that example that he gives of the marketplace. And I think about how I tried to promote my podcast. I essentially did the same thing. I didn't try to, I don't want to really discredit myself and say I didn't try to do really anything, but I do feel like I felt like Opus Clip was the end all be all for my short form content. And all I needed to do is throw tons of videos out into the social media marketplace and allow people to come discover it and come listen to the podcast. And I think that's a little naive. Anything that takes work, that is good and that's going to last, is going to take work to build. So I think I've just got to double down and figure out some better things to work on. The Pareto principle, I've got to figure out the 20% that really feeds the 80% of the results here. The one other thing before I move on into what my strategy is for this next quarter, the one other thing that I did was I had a Facebook group, and I am so excited that I have 4 new members in there that have joined this last quarter. I will say that I've not been active enough in there, or really active at all. The first few episodes, I did a good job of going in there and posting questions and conversation starters. And I even answered some of them when there was nobody else in the group, so that I could just set an example of having a conversation with the questions I post. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe 2-3 episodes at the most. So that was a great start. But then I kind of fell off the horse and have kind of left those folks in there. I had some automatic posts happening every week, like welcoming the new members and that sort of stuff. But again, automated stuff is not going to, until I have a more robust system to really create an automated system that is going to take my place, or hire a VA to be able to come in and actually do that kind of stuff, I'm not going to truly be able to automate a lot of that stuff. I've got to still put brain power in, and I've still got to show up at the end of the day for this stage that I'm in. So my strategy for the next 90 days that I want to give to you and invite you along to try, well, maybe not all of it, but with the private community on Facebook that I've got, I want to be doing probably 2 to 3 posts a week in there, at least one a week, of engaging and trying to encourage the participants to engage in conversations there, so that it actually does become a place of community where you can go and engage in conversation and be supported and find resources for your podcasting journey. So a slight call to action here is I want you to go join the Podcaster's Journey Facebook group. You can go down below in the show notes, in the description, and find a link to the Facebook group. And I would be more than happy to have you there and to engage with you in conversation and to work with you on your podcasting journey, because that's what it's there for. So that's one thing that I'm going to do this next year, or this next quarter. Another thing is that I want to dive more into my ideal listener avatar that I've created for who I believe I'm talking to on the other side of this camera, who I'm talking to in you. I want to get to know you better as far as your pain points, know how I can cater towards you better to make this show, talk about things that I'm going through and struggling through that would be beneficial to you as you're going through your journey, and the solutions that I've come up with and the way I'm working through some of these problems, so that you have someone to listen to who's gone ahead of you that can help you in your journey in that place. And I just want to engage with more folks who would be a good fit, who fit that ideal listener avatar, who fit listening to this show. So one thing that I'm going to be doing, that I'm trying to do, and that I want to implement and do better at, is reaching out to 10 new people every day on social media. And if I do that for a year, this is the cool thing of the power of numbers, when you start to zoom out and see where that's going to take you. If I do that for 1 year, let's say just during the weekdays, that's going to be 2,600 new people. And if I connected with those people and I got just 10% of them over the course of the next year, that's 260 new weekly listeners that I could potentially have in the podcast. And that would be huge. I don't remember the stats, but I'm pretty sure that's going to put me over the 25% of, shoot me up into the 25%, top 25% in podcast, maybe even the top 10%. And that's just by connecting with 10 new people every day. And where am I going to find those? I'm going to, after I understand and really pinpoint the ideal listener avatar, I'm going to be going to Facebook groups, maybe going to Reddit threads, and just trying to engage in conversation in a way that's beneficial and helpful to the community. Not trying to sell anything, not trying to add noise to the marketplace, but just to be a helping hand. And if an episode that I've done happens to be helpful to people, then send them that way. That would be fantastic. That'd be a great way to go. Um, so that's one thing that I want to do to try to build listeners is just build one-on-one relationships with you guys, with you, and connect with you one at a time, and just be a helper. Another thing that I want to do for YouTube is I think I probably need to have better thumbnails. I think that would help the click-through rate. I think the content is okay. I think it could do better, but I think one thing aesthetically that I could do right away is just better thumbnails. So there's that. Big question. Am I going to post a reel/short every single day still, since I talked about adding noise to the market? I think, yes, I'm going to try that still this next quarter. That wasn't a lot of work, but what I'm going to do to tweak it is I'm going to pick about 5 or 6 videos from each interview or each podcast episode and make sure that there's a really clear story from beginning to end. I've been studying stories and trying to do a better job of actually making sure that I'm communicating well through the reel so that there's a better click-through rate, that there's a better engagement rate with that, so that people who are watching them know for sure, hey, yeah, this is for me, or no, this isn't for me. Because I think in the past with the videos I've done, I just haven't made it really clear who it was for or why it would be beneficial for the people who even need it. So I may have missed out on some of them, and that's okay. It's just going to be an awesome way to practice my storytelling skills as I keep going with that. One other thing that I'm going to be trying this next quarter, that is something my business coach has been trying to get me to do for quite a while now, is do more episodic or cinematic thought-provoking reels each week. And so I was actually working on one of those today, and I'm actually really excited about sharing that. I honestly got goosebumps when I was making it, and I was like, this, I think, is where I want to be headed with my short form content. And so I'll be excited to share that. It's going to be a journey called basically building your dream. And so it's going to be an episode each week, about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. And so you can watch for that. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to see those. They'll also be probably on YouTube as well. But that's another strategy that I'm going to have for bringing people in, is being just more thoughtful with my short form and creating that in a way that helps encourage people to build their dreams, specifically people who want to build a podcast. The short form there isn't going to be really on the nose about building a podcast, but it is going to be on the nose about building your dream. And if your dream happens to be building a podcast, well then great. You'll find some of the other content from these conversations that have been clipped up. So, and the last thing is, as much as I hate this answer, it is true. Let me rephrase that. As much as I hate the fact that this is true, there is no way around it. I'm just going to have to go out and experiment and just do some of this stuff. There's no hard and fast rule that says if I do this, I'm going to get this. At least there's not yet. That's what I'm trying to create for you guys. And hopefully in 90 days, I can tell you, hey, yeah, this worked and I'm going to continue with this. This didn't work. And what's really cool is I put out enough content over the last 90 days that I can actually measure the insights and actually know, based off of this last quarter and this upcoming quarter, what went well and what didn't go well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm going to be doing this next quarter. If you want to do any of that, I just want to invite you to do it. That'd be fantastic. Do it along with me. Come join the Facebook group again. Here's another call to action. Come join the Facebook group and tell me that you're doing these things with me. Let's hold each other accountable and let's support each other through these. As we end off, I just want to end with one more story of what I've done in the past that's just like this. And I didn't learn the lesson then, but I'm glad that I'm starting to learn the lesson now. So about 2 years ago, I was trying to post regularly for my music. And I was trying to grow my Instagram account. I had around 700 followers. And I had just had the accident and lost a piece of my finger, about a half inch off my index finger on my left hand. And I said, you know what? I'm going to use this to try to gain some traction on social media. And so I did. I created a story talking about being a pianist and a classically trained pianist and a songwriter, and how it was that I'd lost a piece of my finger, and how it was, you probably know the audio I'm talking about, but it's that audio that talks about, you're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. And the video did really good for the size account that I had. I would say that it went viral. I got like 230,000 views on that video. And it was fantastic. I felt like a major success. But here's what I'm taking away from that now, looking back at it. Then I held it as a trophy and I was like, man, this is amazing. I'm getting some awesome traction on social media. But as I've dove into podcasting and helping other people podcast through the cohort this last 6 weeks, like, I'm understanding the benefit of quality of audience versus quantity of audience. And so, yeah, it was awesome to be viewed by 200,000 people and get that on, have that on my account. But at the end of the day, I really didn't gain a lot of new followers out of that. I didn't gain anybody who was coming to support the mission that I was doing there, to support my music. They were just like, cool story, man, and kept scrolling. And so, and I think in a way I've done that this last 90 days with the podcast. I think some people have found it cool. I've gotten a lot of great impressions. I've gotten a lot of great views even this last 90 days. But I haven't been telling it in a way that really drives home the mission. So I want you to think about that as you're creating your social media content for your podcast. Think about the mission of your podcast, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to serve, who you're trying to serve with your podcast. Think about what they need in their short form content, what's going to be beneficial to them, and really put that into your social media plan. If you have any questions at all, I really want to invite you to come over and join the Facebook group, The Podcaster's Journey, on Facebook, and ask me the questions. Let's engage there. Let's have conversation, and let's encourage each other in this podcasting journey. Until next week, guys, I just want to wish you, until next week, just you, I want to wish you happy podcasting. I'm trying to eliminate the idiom guys out of my vocabulary and form a good habit of talking to just one individual listener, just talking to you. And if you haven't done that in your own podcast yet, that's a pro tip for you right here at the end. Just make sure you're talking to one person on the other side of the camera. So until next time, happy podcasting.